Hi everyone, so in this video I'm going to show you the main component that every student, technician or engineer should know in the laptop motherboard. So let's get started. So the first component that we're gonna say is capacitors. So as a definition, a capacitor is a device that stores an electric charge in an electric field. It is used for storing and discharging the electrical current according to the needs of the circuit. It is also used to purify the electric current. So as you can see here in the images, we have some polarized capacitors and non-polarized capacitors or ceramic capacitors. So here this is basically a ceramic capacitors or a PF capacitors. Those capacitors are not polarized. Here we have its symbols, and here in the left we have chemical capacitors or tantalum capacitors, and over here we have its symbols with plus and minus, as you can see. So basically all these capacitors are used for filtering purposes, but for the polarized capacitors like chemical capacitors and tantalum capacitors, they are used to purify the current or to filter the current in order to get a direct current or continuous current. So the second component that we're gonna talk about is diode. So basically, as you can see here, we have many types of diodes here. We have a normal diode over here, and this is a Zener diode, and over here we have a 3-terminal diodes. This is basically the same working principle as the transistor, and over here we have LED diode. Okay, so the diode of course has basically two terminals, a cathode and the anode. So as a definition, the diode is an electronic component that only allows current to flow in one direction and blocks it in the other direction. It is used to rectify alternating current and to detect high frequency currents. So as you can see here, this is the diode's images here, and over here we have diode symbols. So basically this symbols is for LED diode. As you can see, it has two terminals, cathode and anode. So the LED diode has two arrows, and over here this is the symbol for a normal diode, as you can see, and here the symbol for a Zener diode. So the Zener diode is basically used to stabilize the current. The Zener diode is a stabilizer component. So you can find diodes in every circuit because we use it for protection and other purposes. When the diode is used near to the power jack, we can see that is used for protection, exactly as a fuse. So the second component is the clock generator IC. As you can see here, basically the clock generator IC is one of the main important ICs in every computer motherboard, because without this clock generator the motherboard cannot work properly, because this IC synchronizes all components in the motherboard in order to work properly. So as you can see, always near to the clock generator you will find a crystal oscillator. As you can see here, this is basically a crystal oscillator, and over here this is the circuit pinout or the pin configuration of the clock generation. So as a definition, clock generator IC is an integrated circuit that produces a timing signal for synchronizing a motherboard operations. A resonant circuit or quartz crystal oscillator is very essential for any clock generator. So the next component or IC is the audio IC. Okay, so as you can see here, this is the audio IC. You can find usually the reference or the model of the audio IC in the laptop motherboards and also computer motherboards, ED1981HD. Here we have the circuit pinout, as you can see. So as a definition, the high definition audio IC is a small chip in the motherboard. It is connected directly to the IC head or input-output controller hub. It controls speakers, microphones, and all audio parts in the motherboard. If you have any problem or any issue with microphones, speakers, and so on, you should check the serviceability of this IC. So the next component is the RG45 controller IC. As you can see here, of course, if you check any laptop or computer motherboard, you can find this type of IC. Basically, this is the RG45 controller IC. Here we have its pin configuration or pinout, as you can see. So as a definition, the RG45 IC is an integrated circuit in the motherboard. It is connected directly to the IC head. It controls the RG45 connector. So the next component is MOSFET and transistors. Basically, this is among the most important components in every circuit and in every electronic device. MOSFETs and transistors. Basically, you can find MOSFETs with 3 terminals, 4 terminals, 6 terminals, or even 8 terminals, as you can see here in the pictures. So as a definition, the MOSFET, metal oxide semiconductor field effect transistor, is a semiconductor device which is used for switching and amplifying electronic signals. It is among the most important electronic components on the motherboard. It has many types: MOSFET with 3 terminals or pins, 6 pins, and MOSFET with 8 pins. The MOSFET receives basically the control signal from the IC in its gate and then produce the adequate voltage to the motherboard components. So basically here we have some symbols. This symbols is a symbol for the MOSFET with 8 pins or 8 terminals. So 4 pins for drain connected together, and over here we have 3 pins connected together. This is the source, and 1 pin for the gate. Okay, so basically always the first pin is marked with a dot or a white mark. The first pin always refers to the first pin of the source. Okay, so always the first pin, the second, and the third is for source. So the 4 pins for gate, and the other 4 pins, I mean 5, 6, 7, and 8, are for drain. Here also we have basically a transistor. Here we have emitter, collector, and base. The transistor and the MOSFET are the same, but in terms of testing, there are a slight difference between transistor and MOSFET. So to test the transistor, you should get a reading between base and collector and base emitter. But for the MOSFET, you should get just one reading between drain and source, depending on the type of the MOSFET. Of course, for MOSFETs and transistors, you should never get a buzzer or a continuity. If you get any continuity, means automatically the MOSFET or the transistor is bad, unless you touch the gate or the base with the real probe of the multimeter. In this case, it is normal to get a continuity or a buzzer. So the next component is inductor or coil. So basically there are many types of coil in computer motherboard and laptop motherboard. Here we have some types. As you can see, you can find this type or this or this or this. Basically all these are inductors. So this is the symbol for inductor. As you can see here at the right, it has 2 terminals. Basically the inductor is just a wire or a winding. Okay, if you test it using the multimeter, you will get a continuity. If you get a continuity, it means the inductor is good. If you didn't get any continuity, means the inductor is bad or cutted. So as a definition, it is an electrical conductor, the shape of a coil with a certain number of windings, and it is mainly used in purify the electric current from the XCC frequencies, which we find in all circuits that operate with switch mode power supply system, SMPS. So the next component is resistors. Of course, the resistors we find it in an electronic board. So as a definition, resistors are used to reduce current flow and then adjust the signal levels. So here we have some resistors pictures. Here basically we have 101, means this is a resistor with 100 ohms. Always the third number is the multiplier. Here we have a fuse resistor, we have 0. Here basically we have another resistor, we have 15 ohm Okay, and here we have other resistors. Basically those resistors are a network resistor. So network resistors is a combination of many resistors, 2, 3, 4 or more. So here basically the symbols, here we have a simple symbol. This is a simple resistor with 2 terminals, and here these 2 symbols are for network resistors. So basically we use the network resistor in order to gain the space in the motherboard. Okay, so instead of installing many resistors, you can use just one resistor. We called it a network resistor in order to gain more space in the motherboard. Okay, that's why we use the network resistors. The next component is the quartz crystal oscillator. Basically we find this component always near to the clock generator, to the ICH or super IO in the motherboard. Okay, so this is a very important component. Without this component, the synchronization in the motherboard or even any electronic device cannot happen. So as a definition, a crystal oscillator is an electronic component circuit that uses the mechanical resonance of a vibrating crystal or piezoelectric material to create an electrical signal with a very precise frequency. This frequency is used to keep operations synchronizing in the motherboard by providing a stable clock signal for digital ICs or integrated circuits. So basically each crystal oscillator has a very precise frequency. Okay, you can find, for example, 25 kilohertz or 14 kilohertz and so on, depending on the type of the circuit. The next component is the CMOS battery. Basically this is a very common component that you can find in every motherboard, including computer motherboard, laptop motherboard, tablet motherboards and even smartphone motherboards. Okay, so as a definition, the CMOS battery supplies power to the CMOS chip that resides in the surge bridge or ICH, even when the computer is shut down in order to keep some parameter values safe. The CMOS or complementary metals oxide semiconductor chip contains BIOS configuration or basic input-output system configuration, date, time and other information that is essential for computer startup. As the battery is used to provide power supply to the CMOS chip, that is why it is called CMOS battery. Its voltage is 3 volt. So the last component that we're gonna see is the CPU fan. Basically the CPU fan is used to cool down the CPU. So the combination of the fan and the heatsink keep the computer, especially the central processing unit CPU, cool and prevent it from overheating. The fan moves cool air across the heatsink, pushing hot air away from the computer. Each processor has a thermal sensor that keeps track of the CPU's temperature. If the temperature becomes too hot, the fan might speed up to help cool the processor and heatsink. Because if this component reaches a preset temperature, the computer will shut down automatically. So basically this is the fan over here, and here this is the heatsink. Okay, so these two parts is used to cool down the processor.